to mention something about your brother which they dislike. And one of the companions, he said, Ya Rasulullah, what if what we're saying is true? The Prophet ﷺ said, that is backbiting. And if you say something about them which is untrue, then that is slander. Then not a single word is spoken except that it is being written down and recorded so that we may be held accountable for this. And this is why we see that the sins of the tongue in Islam are considered major sins. A lot of times we tend to put aside sins of the tongue and think it's not such a big deal. But if we were to look at Islam and look at what the Sharia tells us about sins of the tongue, we realize that they are major sins. Backbiting, for example, Allah Azza wa Jalla likens it to eating the dead flesh of another person. أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Would any of you like to eat the dead flesh of your brothers? Certainly you would hate it. Meaning, as you hate the act of eating the dead flesh of another human being, with that type of hatred, we should hate the act of backbiting. So what I wanted to do in this khutbah was to mention some traps, some things, some reasons why people tend to fall into the sins of the tongue. And one of the first reason, and I would say this is at the top of the list, is that many people don't understand what the sins of the tongue are. So you'll tell someone, listen brother or listen sister, you backbit someone. And they'll say, listen, I didn't say anything that wasn't true. I just said something, I just told you what happened. Or I said what the truth was. And we go back to the definition of the Prophet ﷺ. He asked the companions, he said, أَتَدْرُونَ مَا الْغِيبَةِ? He said, do you know what Gheebah is? Do you know what backbiting is? And they said, Allah and His Messenger know best. The Prophet ﷺ said, ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. He said, to mention something about your brother which they dislike. And one of the companions, he said, Ya Rasulullah, what if what we're saying is true? The Prophet ﷺ said, that is backbiting. And if you say something about them which is untrue, then that is slander. So we see the definition of backbiting in Islam is very simple. It's very simple. If you say something about someone that they wouldn't like for you to say about them, you've fallen into backbiting. And it isn't a matter of whether it's true or not, or whether any other reasonings you have. The only test you have to judge your kalam, your speech, the words that you say are, would this person like for me to say this about them or not? Imam Hassan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, when we speak about someone else in a negative way, we're going to fall into one of three categories. So most likely we're going to fall into one of three categories. Either we say something about someone which is true, and the Imam said this is Gheebah, this is backbiting. He said, or we say something about them, meaning something negative, that is not true. He says, then we have fallen into slander. And he says, or we say something about them that we don't know if it's true or not. And he said, this is ifk, rumor mongering. Meaning we heard something and we just said it. We didn't confirm, we didn't check to see if it's true or not. We just heard a news, something negative about someone else, and we told someone else that news. And that's it. Meaning, if we're talking about someone else, if we're saying something negative or mean or anything about someone else that is negative, we're most likely to fall into one of these three sins. The second reason why people tend to fall into sins of the tongue is the urge or the desire of human beings to seek revenge. And that's actually very, very ironic, that a lot of times people, when they get backbitten themselves, or they get slandered themselves, they'll in turn backbite or slander the other person. And the reason why that's ironic is because the Prophet ﷺ one day sat with the companions and he asked them, he said, أَتَدْرُونَ مَنَ الْمُفْلِسِ? He said, do you know who is considered bankrupt? And the companions said, well, the person who doesn't have any wealth and doesn't have any property. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the muflis, the bankrupt person, is the one who comes on the Day of Judgment with their fasting and their qiyam and their prayer and their charity and all these good deeds, thinking that mashallah they're headed for heaven. And what happens to them? But they had backbitten this person, they had slandered another person, they had harmed someone else, and because of that their good deeds are now taken and given to this person that they wronged. Because there's no currency on the Day of Judgment, there's no currency in the hereafter except our deeds. And when this person's good deeds are finished now, that person's bad deeds are put onto this person. So in essence, when we backbite someone or we speak ill of someone out of revenge, who are we really harming? We're harming ourselves. And this is why the same Imam that I talked about before, Imam Hassan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, in his time, a man came to him and he said to him that someone has been talking bad about you. Firstly, the Imam got very upset. He said, hasn't shaitan found a messenger other than you? Meaning this is the work of shaitan, to bring news like this to people and to tell you this person said this about you or that person said this about you. So he got angry and he kicked him out of his house. Then the Imam goes to this person's house, the one who was backbiting the Imam, rahimahullah. And he knocks on the door, and this man opens the door and he's surprised to see the Imam, because he had been talking bad about him and he had been slandering him and backbiting him. And the Imam has in his hands a plate of dates, and he gives it to the man. And he says, listen, I have heard that you have gifted me something, so I wanted to give you something back. What did this man gift Imam Hassan al-Basri? His good deeds. And the Imam says, my only regret is that I cannot repay you with that which you have paid me. Meaning I'm not going to go down to your level. I'm not going to now start backbiting you or speaking evil about you so I can repay you. No. Because this is something that I understand. This is something that Imam understands, rahimahullah ta'ala. So like I said, when we backbite others out of revenge, we're only harming ourselves. Number 3, peer pressure. Now I know a lot of times we hear the words peer pressure and we tend to think of kids or people in middle school and high school, they fall under peer pressure. But I assure you, adults can very well fall into peer pressure also. How many times have we seen people sitting in a gathering and people start talking about someone else? And there may be someone sitting there who doesn't know this person, or they've only heard a couple of things here and there. But to feel like to feel like part of the conversation, they'll say something about them also. Yeah, you know what? Come to think of it, I heard that also. Come to think of it, I think he did that to me also. So they will join in to the backbiting session. Why? Out of peer pressure. And this is one of the, subhanAllah, one of the most common things that happens. And we understand that a role of a Muslim in a situation like that, so if we're attending a gathering or if we're sitting in a gathering where someone is being talked about, a Muslim really has only 3 options. And when I say only 3 options, I mean only 3 options. There are only 3 permissible things for a Muslim to do in that gathering. Number 1, and this is the best thing a person can do, and that is actually come out and defend that person that is being backbitten. Come out and defend that person. Number 2, the second thing a person can do, meaning if they don't have the courage to actually defend that person, they can simply stop the people who are carrying out this sin. So they say, listen brothers, or listen sisters, what's happening here is backbiting. And we cannot do this. This is a sin. It is haram to do this. The third and last thing a Muslim can do, the absolute last thing, so if a person doesn't have the courage to speak out against a sin, is that they can get up and leave. They can get up and leave. That's the very least that is required from a Muslim. A believer will not sit there and listen to a sin happening. Because a believer understands, إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادِ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. That most certainly our eyesight and our hearing and our hearts will be questioned about all of those things. So it's not okay to sit in a gathering and let people backbite someone else. Let someone ruin the reputation and honor of someone else. That's not okay for a Muslim to do that. And the very least a person can do is to get up and to leave. Another reason why people fall into backbiting is jest and play. And this is amazing, subhanAllah, that a lot of times people feel that if someone is spoken about, something wrong is said about someone in a joking manner, it's somehow not backbiting, or it's somehow not slander, and it's somehow okay. That if we have somehow made people laugh, that it's okay, it's not a bad thing. So if we said something mean about someone else, or we said something about someone else that they wouldn't like for us to say in a joking way, and people laughed, that somehow that is not okay. And the scholars, subhanAllah, they talk about this issue. And they say when a person gets involved in backbiting through the method, through the way of laughing and joking and play, they're actually falling into 2 sins. Number 1 is the actual sin of backbiting. Number 2 is the sin of adha. And that is harming your brother and causing hurt and pain to them. Another reason is, and I call this the partner in crime of sins of the tongue. And that is suspicion and going out of one's way to look for the faults of others. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالظَّنِّ فَإِنَّ الظَّنَّ أَكْذَبُ الْحَدِيثِ. He said, beware of suspicion, because suspicion is the worst of false speech. The Prophet ﷺ warned us about the issue of following the mistakes of others, or going out of our way to look for the faults of others. He said, إِنَّكَ إِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ عَوْرَاتَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ أَفْسَدْتَهُمْ. He said, if you were to go out looking for the faults of the Muslims, you will ruin them. And we see that hadith coming to life today. How many communities have been ruined because of suspicion? How many households have been ruined? How many families have been ruined? How many relationships have been ruined? How many people, how many spouses have had issues because of suspicion? And because of going out of our way to seek the faults of others. The Prophet ﷺ, and this, subhanAllah, is a very, very scary hadith. He said, مَنْ تَتَبَّعَ عَوْرَةَ أَخِيهِ الْمُسْلِمِ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ وَمَنْ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ يَفْضَحُ وَلَوْ كَانَ فِي بَيْتِهِ وَلَوْ كَانَ فِي بَيْتِهِ أو ولو كان في جوف بيته أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet said that the one who goes out of their way to seek the faults of others, then Allah will seek the faults of this person. That if we go out of the way to seek the faults of others, Allah will go out of His way, meaning Allah will seek out our faults. وَمَنْ تَتَبَّعَ اللَّهُ عَوْرَتَهُ, and the one whose faults are sought out by Allah, يَفْضَحُ, he will be ruined and he will be humiliated, even if he is hiding in the deepest corner of his house. Because the reality is, my brothers and sisters, we all make mistakes. We all commit sins. And we all have things that we may not be happy about. And the last thing that we want is for the all-hearing and the all-seeing Allah Jalla wa Ala to expose our faults. Because that is what the Sharia requires of us. It requires that we be careful about the things that we say. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ told us that إِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَا يَتَكَلَّمُ بِالْكَلِمَةِ لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا. That a servant, meaning a servant of Allah, may say a word not thinking much of it, meaning not caring much about it, not thinking twice about something they said. لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا, not thinking about it. يَهْوِي بِهَا فِي جَهَنَّمْ. And this word causes them to enter the hellfire because of the implications that this word has. And there's a hadith that a lot of us love to quote. A lot of us love to talk about. And this is something that you see many people, they like to tweet this hadith, and you'll see it will be posted on their Facebook statuses all the time. But this hadith is very hard to implement. And it takes a lot of jihad. It takes a lot of struggling with our soul to implement this hadith. And that is what Islam asks us to do. And this hadith is what مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, that the one who believes in Allah and the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, that they should say that which is good or stay silent. And that is the way of a believer. That is the goal, my brothers and sisters, that we want to live our lives in a positive way, where if things come out of our mouth, they're positive things, that we stop ourselves from falling into sins of the tongue. And I leave you with one final saying, and this is a famous saying of the Arab. They say, كَلِمَةٌ فِي جَوْفِكَ أَسِيرٌ عِنْدَكَ, that a word that you haven't spoken yet, a word that is inside of you, is your prisoner. Meaning you control it. You control its outcome. You control when to say it. You control how to say it. You control who to say it to. It's your prisoner. وَكَلِمَةٌ تَتَكَلَّمُ بِهَا تَجْعَلُكَ أَسِيرًا, but a word once spoken will now make you its prisoner. So once you have spoken this word, now you're accountable for this word. You're accountable for how this word affected someone else. And most importantly, you're accountable for how this word was taken by the people and how it will affect you on the Day of Judgment. Because certainly we will be held accountable. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.